We've built the box, covered it in vinyl, and today we're wrapping up this series as we put our finishing touches on our luggage trunk by adding the final details that take it from a vinyl box to a fully finished luggage trunk. We're talking hinges, latches, leather corners and straps, and so much more. By the end of this video, this won't just be a trunk, it'll be a road-ready piece of rolling history, built to last and ready to ride. So grab your tools, roll up your sleeves, and let's get to work. First up is the aluminum guard. This trunk needs to be ready for anything, rain or shine. To keep dust and water out when the lid is closed, we're installing an aluminum strip around all four sides of the box. We started by measuring and marking with a punch where the holes would go. Then, using a drill press, Pat drilled out holes in each of our four pieces of aluminum. To get the best possible placement, we lined up our aluminum guards, clamped them in place, and drilled small pilot holes through each of our openings. To attach the aluminum guard on the interior front and back sides of the box, we used 5 5/8" stainless steel sheet metal screws per piece. With the front and back pieces attached, we moved on to the left and right sides of the box. Just as before, we drilled 3 small pilot holes through each of our openings. Then, we used 3 screws on each side to get a secure fit. Finally, we used a little bit of compressed air to clean up our mess. With our aluminum guards in place, we added some black neoprene weather stripping around them, right along the top on all 4 sides of the box. Next up are the hinges. We're using 3 nickel-plated trunk hinges to give the lid a solid pivot. To get them lined up perfectly, we made a simple template that sits across the back of the box, letting us mark and drill the pilot holes exactly where we need them.
You guys good? Are you happy?
I'm good. Yep, I'm
You gotta
good.
be happy. Be happy.
Each hinge has 2 parts, a lower part that attaches to the lower section of the box, and an upper part that attaches to the lid. We began by lining up our template across the lower part and drilling 3 pilot holes for each of our 3 hinges. With the holes ready, we began attaching our hinges using stainless steel screws. Once the lower parts of all 3 hinges were attached, we began work attaching the upper parts. To do this, we simply sat the lid down squarely onto the trunk body, lifted the upper part of each hinge into place against the lid of the trunk, and began to drill out 6 more pilot holes. Taking our time and working together to set each one, we drove the screws in one by one until all 3 hinges were locked in place. With the hinges in place, we turned our attention to the handles. Each trunk gets 2 handles, one for each side. To help us line these up just where we want them, we marked up a piece of blue painter's tape, 12 inches up from the bottom. From there, we located the halfway point going right to left across the side of the box, then marked out where we'd drill our first pilot holes for our 2 trunk handle brackets, approximately 3 1/8 inches out from the center on each side. With our holes marked, Pat drilled a few shallow holes into the first side of our box. Then, we removed the tape and began attaching the trunk handle brackets and the black leather trunk handle with 2 more stainless steel screws. Next, with our handle in place, Al screwed 2 more shallow pilot holes through the remaining holes in the 2 handle brackets, and then secured the handle with 2 more stainless steel screws. With one handle in place, we moved to the other side of the trunk and repeated the process. Our leather handles, handle brackets, latches, and hinges were all purchased through Snyder's and are typically readily available. However, the leather corners we'll have to make ourselves.
The other side nice and tight. Yeah, that's going to be... Yeah, it looks nice like that.
To fashion our corners, we took a trip to our local leather shop and purchased a pre-stained double shoulder. If you haven't already figured it out yet, we aren't just building one trunk, we're actually building 4 of them. This double shoulder will give us enough leather for all of the corners of 3 of our 4 trunks. We began with our 2 most difficult pieces, the upper front-facing corners of the trunk lid. To create each of these corner pieces, we need 2 10-inch long by 5-inch wide pieces of leather. Using a leather working tool called an awl, we marked out our cut lines on the back side of our leather. Then, using a pair of sharp scissors, we cut it out. To prepare the leather for wet forming, we soaked our 2 corner pieces in room temperature water for about 15 minutes until it became fully saturated and pliable. Once the leather was ready, we laid it out on the workbench for a few minutes to let it relax. We cut our pieces bigger than we need because we'll need the extra leather to number 1, hold on to as we pull and stretch it into place, and number 2, we'll need the extra material to staple through so that the leather can be held in place for 24 hours in order to give it time to dry and harden. Pat cut the sides of our mold to mirror the corners of our trunk lid, giving us a perfect replica that we can use to form our leather corners. We've marked a series of lines on our mold to help guide us as to how far the leather needs to go and where it's safe to staple and cut. We began by tacking in a few starter staples just to hold the leather in place.
Because to me, the whole piece has to stretch to make this.
All right.
Then, we pulled the leather out and down over the corner of the form.
You got to pull that way.
Lining it up with our layout marks.
See how that's curving, Pat?
Working a small section at a time, we stretched and smoothed the leather, pushing any wrinkles out past our cut line, before locking that section down with more staples.
Are we ready to go ahead and staple that right there? I think.
Slowly and steadily, we moved from section to section, stretching, smoothing, and stapling, again and again.
Happy?
Yep.
You're good?
Yep. Oh my God. This one's not open. Go for it.
With that, our first corner was tight, clean, stapled down, and ready to dry.
That dryer. Oh,
The other corner worked the same as the first, tacking it down on one side to anchor it, and then stretching, smoothing, and stapling, small section by section, until it was done. You just have to be patient, working the leather again and again until you get it to relax and lay down the way you want it to.
Up here, where my finger is, or? Okay.
With both corners on the form, George used his heat gun to lightly warm them to give them a jump start on drying out. We'll give these pieces a few days to dry and harden before we cut them out and attach them to the trunk.
Yeah, and be careful. That gun will get very hot very quick, so test it with your hand because you don't want to burn the leather.
A few days later, the leather was dry and ready to be cut. To make sure we got each corner just right, George designed some paper templates that we could lay over the leather and trace. With Pat holding the template in place, George carefully marked the cut lines using an awl, working slowly to stay accurate. Once the outlines were traced, he also used the awl to mark where the tack holes would go.
Okay. Look at that.
With everything marked, George grabbed an X-Acto knife and started cutting the first corner. Cutting leather, especially when it's been shaped and molded like this, takes a careful hand and a bit of patience. It's easy to lose your focus and veer off the line, so George took his time, making sure every edge was smooth and even as he went, cutting one side of the fold and then the other, working his way around the shape until the full corner was free. Once we were happy with the cut, we pulled out the staples and peeled away the excess leather from the form. George gently lifted the finished corner off the mold.
Yeah, look at that.
Kind of looked like we knew what we were doing.
Yeah.
He brought it over to the trunk and held it in place. And just like we had hoped, it fit perfectly.
That's going to look nice, Pat.
With one front corner cut, we moved on to the other. Just like before, we started by laying down our paper template to trace the cut line. Then, marked the tack holes using the awl. Once the first side of the corner was marked, we repeated the same steps for the second side. Using the same approach as before, George followed the marked lines with the X-Acto knife, cutting along one fold at a time. The process was smooth and consistent, and by taking his time around the curves, he was able to get another clean, accurate cut. Before long, the second piece was trimmed and ready for fitting.
Beautiful. Really nice.
The two front lower corners and the two back upper corners of the box require a different approach. To create these corner pieces, George started by making two new templates, one for a 4-inch circle and another for a 5-inch one. Instead of using the two paper templates for tracing the cut lines, this time, to keep our circles more consistent, he also created two solid fiberglass versions to use as cutting guides. With the templates ready, he began cutting out two 4-inch circles, then two 5-inch ones. With all 4 circles cut out, Pat used the paper templates to mark our cut lines and tack holes.
Marking the cut line and the holes.
With our marks made, I used a sanding block to clean up the edges. From there, it was back over to George to cut the radius for the 4-inch circles. With the line cut, Pat used the awl to enlarge the tack holes. To finish our 4-inch circles off, George used an edge beveler to create a more decorative edge along the cut line and the circumference of each side. To wrap up the 5-inch ones, we beveled the circumference of those as well, and George cut them in half along the diameter.
That works slick.
It's so slick.
Just like before, we dropped them in our bucket of water for about 15 minutes to soak. And then we pulled them out, let them rest for a minute, and then tacked them to our form.
Right there. Now I'm just gonna pull this down. And then let's pull this one over. Now, take a look and see if you think they're kind of even or not. Okay, let's do that right there.
With our left upper back corner in place, we lined up our thumbtacks with the marks that Pat made with the awl, and then secured it to the form.
Perfect. Last one.
With the first corner attached, we moved on to the right upper back corner piece. Folding opposite of the way that he did before, George carefully folded the wet corner piece along the corner of our form. And once secure, Pat pushed thumbtacks through the marks on that piece as well. Moving on to our 5-inch half circles, we soaked those in our water and attached them to our form as well. While our 4-inch circles require 3 tacks per side, our 5-inch circles are larger and thus need 4 of them. One by one, Pat pressed our thumbtacks through our marks as George held the leather in place. Once the first piece was finished, we repeated the process on the second one.
That's in a knot.
Just as before, working together, Pat pressed each thumbtack through the marked spots, one at a time, as George held the leather steady against the form. With our final corner piece attached, George used his heat gun to jumpstart the drying process, and we shifted our attention to our final set of leather pieces that we needed to make for this trunk. The last few pieces are pretty easy and straightforward. We need to cover up the 2 lines of staples going down the 2 vertical back edges of the box. In order to cover up the staples and give the trunk a finished look, we cut out a 3-inch wide by 32-inch piece of leather using a leather strap cutter. We'll cut it in half, making it 16 inches long, and wrap each of the halves around the corners to cover up each line of staples on the back of the box. With all our leather pieces cut out and formed, it was time to apply the beeswax. Beeswax conditions, protects, and even waterproofs leather. It also gives it a nice shine. We're going to get started by warming and melting these small beeswax pellets into a liquid. To do this, we placed some of the pellets into a small tin and began to warm it with our heat gun. It is best to gently melt the wax, being careful to avoid direct heat, which keeps it from darkening and changing color. It took a few minutes, but once it was melted down, we used the heat gun to gently heat up our pieces of leather a little bit too. Ultimately, this will help the beeswax to better absorb into the leather as well. With everything warmed, George used a paintbrush to apply the beeswax to the leather. Once he had a decent amount of beeswax on the leather, he used his heat gun to remelt it and let it soak down into the piece. Once remelted, he rubbed it into the leather using a clean piece of denim until the beeswax completely absorbed into it. With the first side done, we flipped it over and repeated the process on the back side. Once the beeswax had absorbed and dried, we used a clean piece of denim to gently buff the leather surface. This helps to remove any excess wax and enhance the shine. You can apply additional thin layers of beeswax and repeat the process if you want to, in order to further the conditioning or give it a stronger shine. And while you're at it, make sure you don't forget to do the edges of the leather as well. We repeated this process for all of the other pieces of leather until every piece had been done and was ready to go on the trunk. Before we can tack down the leather, we need to apply a layer of barge to each corner. Barge is a strong, fast-drying adhesive that will bond the leather securely to the trunk box. To protect the box from any excess glue that might squeeze out during tacking, we'll tape around each corner beforehand. Using an X-Acto knife and some painter's tape, Al began carefully masking off the corners of the trunk. With the first corner masked off and ready to go, Al moved on to the back corner and began work on that one as well. As Al taped off the corners, George and Pat began applying barge to the four corners of the trunk lid. Just like with the contact cement that we used earlier for the vinyl, the barge needs a few minutes to become tacky before bonding. To give ourselves some working time, we applied the adhesive to all four corners and inside of all four leather corner pieces, one by one, allowing them to set up while we continue to work our way around the trunk. Once we returned to the front left corner of the trunk lid, it was ready to bond. Carefully lining up the leather with the curved front edge, we firmly pressed it onto the trunk lid and down into place. Once we finished the first corner, we continued around the trunk and attached the other three corners as well. With all four corners now in place, it was time to lock them down with tacks. Since this trunk will be riding outside, exposed to sun, rain, and everything in between, we chose stainless steel tacks for their durability and rust resistance. The ones we picked out also have a subtle hammered finish, which not only matches the period style, but adds a little extra character to the trunk as well. To install them, we used a rubber mallet and a pair of needle nose pliers to hold each tack steady. Working one at a time, we lined each tack up with our pre-marked holes and tapped it into place. Once the first corner was fully secured, we moved on to the rear corner and repeated the process. Marking them out earlier really paid off, and it meant that our spacing was perfect and that we could move confidently and efficiently from one tack to the next without having to guess. And before long, all 4 corners were neatly fastened down, giving the trunk a sturdy, finished look. To wrap up the front corners, George trimmed away the excess leather so that each piece sat flush against the underside of the lid, leaving our lines clean and straight. Then, to finish up, George used the beveling tool to cut beveled edges along the bottom of both corners. Next up were the final corners of the box. We began by laying the box on its back and masking off the 2 lower front corners. With our tape in place, we removed the leather and began to apply barge underneath on the 2 lower front corners of the trunk. While we waited for the barge on the corners to get tacky, we began applying cement to the inside of the 2 leather corners as well. Once both parts became tacky, we pressed the leather firmly onto the first corner and began tacking it down. With the first corner finished, we moved on to the other one and tacked that one down too. Moving to the 2 back edges, we lined up the bottom of the first edge piece with the bottom of the box, and then at the top, marked out the top corner with the awl and a square. Once we had our lines marked, we cut off the excess and then moved to the workbench to bevel the rough edges with our beveling tool.
Oh, that's good.
With one edge piece cut, we moved on to the other side and repeated the process just as before, marking, cutting, and beveling the rough edges. Before long, we were ready to cement these edges to the trunk as well. Masking off our edges, we began to apply layers of barge to both back sides of the trunk body, as well as the insides of our 2 leather edge pieces. With everything tacky and ready to go, we pressed the leather edges down over the edges of the box and began to tack these pieces down as well. Working one line at a time, we began attaching our stainless steel tacks through the leather strips and onto the back edges of the trunk. Starting at the top and working our way down the back side of the box, our pre-marked holes kept our spacing consistent and our lines clean. Once finished, these strips will reinforce the back edges of the trunk, covering our vinyl seams and giving it a clean, finished look. With the end of this build in sight, we moved on to our leather straps. Each leather strap will be cemented onto the trunk about 8 inches in from each side. Marking out our first edge, we laid the leather strap down onto the trunk, then masked off the other side as well. With both strap sections carefully masked off and prepared, Pat began to apply our cement, while George applied some of his own to the underside of the brown leather strap. Working together, George and Al began attaching the strap, starting first at the back of the lid, and then over the top and down the front face of the trunk, and then underneath. The lower section of the strap will be secured underneath with staples later on, but for now, we moved on to the second strap. Just like with our first one, Pat carefully lined up the end of the second strap with the back edge of the trunk lid. Then, Al carefully guided the strap into place across the top of the trunk, then down the front of the trunk along our line. Once the strap was secure against the face of the trunk, Al wrapped the bottom of the strap underneath the trunk and out of the way. And with the strap secured, we removed the tape, laid down the box on its back, and stapled those 2 straps to the bottom of the box. The last step to bring this trunk project to completion are the 2 front latches. To kick things off, Al cut a line through each of the 2 brown leather straps, right along the lower edge of the trunk lid, separating the top of the trunk from the bottom. To install the latches, we lined up the first latch with our strap, with the top of the latch on the trunk lid and the bottom of the latch positioned underneath it on the bottom half of the box. Using the awl, Pat marked out 2 screw holes on the top of the latch. Then, we removed the bottom of the latch and attached the top with 2 stainless steel screws. With the top of the latch attached, we moved to the bottom half. Once we made sure everything lined up just right, Pat used the awl to mark out the 3 holes on the bottom of the latch. Then, we secured it with 3 screws. With the first latch attached, we moved on to the second one and did the same. And to wrap up this build, we created a simple template to mark out the locations of the tacks that would attach the strap on the back of the trunk lid. And then we tacked each of these straps down with 3 stainless steel tacks apiece.
previously.
And with that, our trunk was finished. This trunk build was a lot of fun and a real challenge. Inspired by a decades-old article on making a Model A luggage trunk from scratch, we set out to bring that idea into the modern era with cleaner visuals and hands-on instructions. With the help of Pat and Al, we turned it into a project that we hope inspires you to try something like this yourself. Our goal was simple: take a piece of Model A history, give it new life, and make the process accessible for anyone who wants to give it a go. Seeing it all come together by hand with friends was incredibly rewarding, and that's what this hobby is all about. Join us next time as we bring you more tips and information on how to maintain and enjoy your Ford Model A on the next Car and Driver episode of Epic Restorationz.